What happens when one man tries to watch all of the sci-fi films of the 1980s? Well, we're about to find out because I'm your host, Josh Spiegel, and this is the 80s Project. Welcome back to the sci-fi edition of the 80s Project, and we're in 1984, and we've already had so many major movies. We've had Ghostbusters, we've had Star Trek 3, we've had Last Starfighter, we've had Neverending Story, we've had so many big movies that clearly there can't be any major releases like that left. Can there? Yeah, there can. Okay, apparently we have to start this episode by going back a bit and go back to March 9th because Joe Lotion asked why I didn't include Splash. And I realized I should have because it's clearly fantasy and falls into that category. So here we go. Splash. It starts with Wole Bole 20 years ago as a little Alan and his brother Freddie are on the water with the family by Cape Cod, and he sees something in there that compels him to just jump in. There, he encounters a little girl, but he's pulled back up and they sail away. But it's revealed that she has a fishtail. 20 years later, Alan is now the owner of Bubba Gump Shrimp and also a produce company, along with Freddie, who is now Harry Crumb.
Who put this goddamn fruit here?
Alan can't tell his girlfriend that he loves her, so she leaves him, which makes him yell at Clint Howard. Depressed, he goes back to Cape Cod, where he encounters Johnny Rose and accidentally falls into the water and gets hit on the head. He's rescued, though, by a mysterious replicant, and she's naked, unless you're watching the dumb Disney Plus version with the CGI hair covering her butt. She just swims away, but she's that same mermaid girl from the opening, and Kornbluth spots her underwater. She decides that she needs to go track Alan down, and she's so annoyed at this turtle right here. Look at how mad she gets. Lady, he's just trying to turt down there. She shows up nude at the Statue of Liberty.
French citizens, and has come to symbolize hope for naked women everywhere. Bocce balls!
And the police find Alan's wallet on her and call him, so he takes her home with him. And she learns English by watching TV. They also walk by a movie theater showing both Evil Dead and Extra, which is pretty awesome, but right next to it is the one showing The Mistress, Sweet Cheeks, and Skin Tight. Decisions. She chooses the name Madison, and I'll talk about that in a second, but she only has 6 days there before she has to go home, because again, she's a mermaid. A fact that she hides from Alan, but the trouble arises when Kornbluth is humiliated for his claims of a fish woman and decides to try to reveal her presence to the world. And this was an earlier directorial effort from Ron Howard, and it was also the first big project for Tom Hanks as well. The producers originally wanted a known actor and considered Chevy Chase and John Travolta for the role, but then opted to go with a lesser-known player to have the character be more of an everyman. Kinda hard to believe, but the budget wasn't that big, at only $11 million, but when it was released, it was met with a good amount of positivity and strong reviews that praised Hanks, Hannah, and Howard's direction. It was even nominated for an Oscar for Best Screenplay and a Golden Globe for Best Picture, musical or comedy, but it didn't win any of those. But it was a big hit. It made around $70 million at the box office and was one of the highest grossing films of the year. 4 years later, they made a sequel called Splash TOO2 that was made for television, although all of the major players were recast and the only returning actor would be Dodie Goodman as the wacky receptionist. There's been attempts to make a remake for a while, and one is still bouncing around out there, and at one point Channing Tatum was connected to play a merman. But there's one other influence that this one has had. You see, the name Madison didn't exist before this movie. It did, but it was an obscure name for men that fell out of favor in the early part of the 20th century. Like her picking the name Madison was supposed to be funny because it was, as Alan says, not a name. But then, because of this film, it became one, and in modern times is one of the most popular female names in use. And I'll go with a 3.5 out of 5 on this. I think it's a lot of fun, but honestly, Alan is such a dick that it's hard to be on his character's side. Like, Hanks does a great job with him, but he's just written as a spoiled man baby that's hard to like. But it's a cute flick, and Candy and Levy steal the show, while Daryl Hannah steals your heart. The sci-fi cultural significance is a 4 though, since it was very popular, kickstarted an entire name, and launched Hanks as a major comic actor, but it's not on that next level of recognition in terms of longevity and being a franchise or whatever. Like, modern audiences aren't as familiar with it as they once were, so it's hard to give it higher. Should you watch it? Yes, and then yell, "What a week I'm having."
Hey, Roaring. Jag hör en turf and in Tom's penis.
Back to our regularly scheduled year now as we move further into 84 and get to one that I can't wait to talk about, since on September 14th we had the arrival of the brother from another planet. It begins with an alien ship crash landing on Ellis Island, and when the pilot emerges, it's Miles Dyson. He appears to be missing a foot and can't talk, but the next morning his foot has regrown, although he only has 3 toes and funky nails. He wanders around New York trying to figure out how things work, and he has the ability to open a cash register, but seems to understand what a police officer is based on his badge and gun. He goes into a bar where Kung Fu Joe is hanging out, as is Old Moses, and also Daryl Edwards, and coincidentally enough, he also had a tiny role in Splash as one of the reporters. There, he also encounters Sam, a social worker, and he helps him out by finding him a place to stay with a single mother. Not only can he fix electronic devices by touching them, but he can also heal injuries too. But then there's these 2 creepy looking guys, and they have a picture of the brother and are looking for him. And he just sort of listens to people as they talk about their troubles and the state of the world. The men in black come to a bar and claim the brother is an illegal alien, where he meets Vince Latello, who does him a card trick, and then a couple of tourists who are lost, and then becomes infatuated with pictures of a singer. After encountering a series of different people with their stories in the city, revealing that he is a slave that is on the run, as the men in black search for him, the people he encounters cover him to keep him hidden. But he may not be alone, because he spots some writing on the wall from his own species. Oh yeah, did I mention he can take out his eyeball and see through it? And this is a great flick from John Sayles, who both wrote it and directed. And keep in mind, this is the man who wrote the original Piranha, Battle Beyond the Stars, Alligator, and The Howling, and this was an early directorial effort from him, but he'd go on to do some higher profile stuff like 8 Men Out, Passion Fish, and Lone Star, the latter 2 which he'd get Oscar nominations for. While Sayles was making a film called Leanna, he had a series of dreams that inspired the story of this one, and while he was looking for funds for his bigger budget and higher profile drama Matawan, he had the opportunity to get this made, so he jumped on it. The budget was only $350,000, and some of it came from a grant, but most of it was self-financed, and the reviews were extremely positive, with most of the praise going to Morton's silent performance. And here's the weird part. The film was a surprise success, earning $4 million at the theater, but someone on the production team failed to process the copyright information properly. So on the day it opened in theaters, it became part of public domain and anyone could release it. But later on, they released a DVD version with a commentary track from Sayles, and the commentary was copywritten, so that version is protected. It's also gone on to become a minor cult classic, and I'm honestly surprised that no one has tried to remake it by this point, considering its relevance in today's landscape. And I'm a strong 4 on this one, and part of me wants to go 4.5, so maybe an honorary 4.25, but it's such a great film with wonderful characters and performances and a great message. I know I've said it repeatedly, but the Sci-Fi of '84 has shown it over and over that strong political and social messages have always been prevalent in genre films. The significance is just a 2 though, because it's never really caught on in terms of name recognition and has never risen higher than the cult fringe, but it has a number of names involved, which has earned a cool spot in the sci-fi world. Should you watch it? Hell yeah, this is worth a look.
Want to see me make all the white people disappear?
59th Street, Columbus Circle, 125th Street next. This is the Uptown A Express going to 27. Change for the AA local across the platform. The D. On the upper level, change for the number 1 Broadway
See?
train.
What'd I tell you?
This next one is a little bit funny to have on here, since it's a part of a series, and the other entries were out in the early 80s, but I didn't cover them because they didn't qualify. And on the same day, September 14th, we had Ninja 3, The Domination. The opening has a man entering a cave and opening a secret compartment to reveal a number of ninja-themed weaponry, and then suits up and goes to a golf course where he takes out a whole security squad and kills a man in broad daylight. And I love this, because I guess he just hid in these trees all day, because I know he wasn't just strolling around the course in this outfit from tree patch to tree patch. A huge police chase is kicked off involving helicopter shenanigans and throwing star deaths, and eventually, after like 30 guys with guns are unable to take out one dude with a sword, they manage to shoot him up. But then he vanishes, burying himself in the ground somehow. We then meet a telephone line repairman who might get electrocuted and experience some actual electric boogaloo, and the ninja hypnotizes her, and then something mystical happens between the two of them. The police question her.
Thanks, but I don't use soft drinks.
Oh man, I'm envious. I went to rehab and finally got myself clean, but then fell right off the wagon and started using soft drinks again. A cop flirts with her, like, aggressively. Like she says no very firmly, and an hour later, he's calling her and asking again, and she again turns him down, so he follows her to her aerobics class. Like, take a hint, dude. There's then a group of gym dudes just shaking down a lady outside, and man, the men in this film sure are class acts. And after she fights them, the cop then arrests her.
And if you don't want to go out with me just because I'm a cop, then the hell with you, lady.
Class acts. All of them. Well, I guess that child's temper tantrum won her over, though, because she invites him over and bones him while pouring V8 on her chest. And let me check. Yep, written by a dude. That night, she has a vision of a floating sword, and then the next day spots a man and follows him. But then, oh no! Neon video games and smoke machines and laser lights. We're definitely in the 80s now. Before you know it, she's decked out in his ninja gear and taking out that guy from earlier, and it soon becomes apparent that she's possessed by the spirit of the ninja and getting revenge on the cops who shot him. But they need help, so they go to get some from Lo Pan, which leads to a pretty ridiculous exorcism. And an important fact:
only a ninja can destroy a ninja.
And this may be Ninja 3, but don't worry, you're not missing anything if you haven't seen the first two. Those were 1981's Enter the Ninja and 83's Revenge of the Ninja, but the films had no actual connection to each other outside of sharing a couple of actors, although playing different roles in each. They were also straightforward action films with no supernatural or fantasy elements like the one on display here. It was directed by Sam Furstenberg, who also did the second film and would later go on to handle the American Ninja series and also Breakin' 2. It was produced by Cannon Films, and they had a deal with Lucinda Dickey and really thought that she could be the next big thing. They put her in Breakin' and Breakin' 2, and then this, but their follow-up films, Breakin' 3 and a King Solomon's Mine movie, either didn't happen or instead used a different actress. This one cost $2 million to make, a big jump from the $700K that Revenge of the Ninja cost, and closer to the $1.5 million budget of Enter the Ninja. However, whereas the first two entries made around $15 million each, this one only earned around $7 million, half of those. Because of this, no further follow-ups were made. And this is fun. It's a 3. It's not very good, but it's always entertaining, although sometimes for the wrong reasons. The SFCS is a 2.5 since it had a little bit of notoriety, but not all that much, and it got a good amount of cable play and was seen quite a bit and then became a so bad it's good cult classic. Should you watch it? Yeah, get Dominated and then see the movie.
Help me. Oh, Billy, help me. I'm scared.
We're going to take a little detour up to Canada now and also to the small screen because on September 22nd we were overdrawn at the memory bank. It starts with showing us Gomez Adams, and then I swear it was going to do the Doctor Who opening. It's the future, and Aram works for this big corporation called NovaCorp, and he spends his time just watching Casablanca. When he's caught, he has to go to something called a psychist, and this is shot on the classic video that old made-for-TV stuff was done on, and he's assigned to rehabilitation.
Listen, Felicia, I've asked you out 67 times. You always say no.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Here's a hint. Maybe after the second no, you stop. Part of the rehab is a process called a doppel, where your mind is transferred into an animal. And while reporting in, he's monitored by a woman named Apollonia. And this is a weird coincidence, since she's played by Linda Griffiths, and one of the few films that she did before this one was Leanna, that John Sayles movie that I spoke about earlier. They expose their brains in order to do it, and then let a bunch of kids in. And are you kidding? That is just like asking for Cheerios in their cerebellum or something. So, Aram doppels into a monkey, but when he's attacked by an elephant, he requests to be pulled early. But, oops, they've misplaced his body, so his mind is lost in the system. And when word of it gets out, NovaCorp's stock crumbles. And the head of the River Rats is here, and they're told to find his body quick, or they'll terminate his mind in the system. Apollonia decides to allow Fingal the ability to create his own simulated world while she interfaces with him and informs him of the situation through an avatar of his mom. But then things get weird when a man doing an impression of Peter Lorre shows up, and then he's straight up in Casablanca, in which another version of him is Bogey. But try as they may to keep him reined in and just go back to his old job, he decides to fight back and tear down the whole company. Although not right away. Actually, right away he goes back and asks his co-worker to sleep with him for the 68th time, and she says no again. So he asks again, but this time used his ability to shape the simulation to make her say yes. But things get weird when they find his body and plan to give it a sex change? Okay, so I mentioned this was a TV movie, and it was by Douglas Williams, and all of his work is in the TV realm, including a handful of episodes of Fraggle Rock. It was based on a short story from 1976 with that same name, and even though the exact budget isn't known, producers claimed that it was well into 7 figures. It ran on Canadian TV and then screened in the US on PBS as a part of American Playhouse, and the reviews weren't great, but it's hard to say how well it performed, although the producers claimed that they were happy with it. But much later, it was the focus of a season finale of MST3K, and the film received a pretty vicious ribbing, and that episode is often considered one of the best of the series. And this is a bit of a mess, but I can't say I thought it was terrible, so I'll go 2 with it. It's mostly dull, But I kind of dig that shot-on-video glaze it has, and the concepts are cool, if it only did something with them. The SFCS is just a 1.5 because it is mostly not known, although it does have a handful of people you'll know, but most of that 0.5 is for the notoriety it got on Mystery Science Theater. Should you watch it? Maybe not. It's kind of interesting, but I'll admit it's better with Robot Shadows making fun of it. Get ready to bring things down a bit, and let's cross the ocean to the UK and stay on the small screen as September 23rd brought us Threads. We're in Sheffield, and the news talks about tensions between the USSR, America, and Iran, and Russia has invaded Iran after the US backed a coup there. Ruth and Jimmy find out that they're pregnant and plan to get married, but the news just keeps up with things escalating and sunken ships and troops deployed. People start protesting, and the UK commits to helping NATO, but people fear nuclear attacks and then start panic buying. But then, the combat begins as the American troops and Russian troops start fighting, and people try to get out of the cities, and confusion sets in. There are some news reports about possible nuclear explosions in the Middle East, and riots start breaking out, and we check in on Jimmy and Ruth as they deal with the situation. People start building fallout shelters, but then it happens, and the air raid sirens go off, and nukes are launched. The initial blast destroys massive amounts of property, and people panic as Sheffield is targeted, since it's an industrial center. Jimmy gets into a truck to find Ruth, and their families are all caught in a blast. And everything burns, and it's just really dark. Like if you watched The Day After and were like, this is a shocking view of what a nuclear blast would be like, then this movie is going to destroy you. Jimmy's mom is burns all over, but now the fallout hits the area, and his father appears to be suffering from radiation poisoning. And yeah, everything's ruined. It's all destroyed, and it all gets worse from here. And you know, I thought that The Day After and Testament were bleak, and I'm not going to say that they weren't, but this is the one that really shows how awful and straight up apocalyptic that a nuclear war would be. And it's insane to think it ran on television. The director was Mick Jackson, and he had previously done a documentary series about Armageddon, and his career would take a much lighter turn in the 90s, where he would do Steve Martin's LA Story, and then The Bodyguard, and then Volcano. A huge amount of research went into the script by Barry Hines, and it's since been called the closest vision of what a nuclear war's results would be. It aired on the BBC, and the ratings were strong, but after a return screening in 1985, it wasn't aired again until around 20 years later. It did get nominations for a bunch of BAFTAs and won 4 of them, including Best Drama. Over time, it's developed a reputation as a jarring and horrifying work and a haunting warning, and it's earned a huge cult following, and even had an action figure made of the traffic warden character. Recently, there's been discussions about a reboot, a TV series by the team that made Adolescence, but it's still in the early stages. And I'm going big with this one. It's a 4.5. This movie is haunting. I know I have this in the Sci-Fi project, but it's one of the most horrific films I've ever seen. And the way they film it, making it feel like a newsreel or procedural film, just evokes a realness that unsettles me. I love it, and I just hate watching it. The SFCS is only a 2 though, and if you're watching this in the UK, you'll probably disagree, but I rate this part based on its impact in the US, and this one just didn't hit that hard over here. Should you watch it? Yeah, but be prepared to be really bummed out afterwards. Alright, we're back in the US now, and we're back on the big screen. And we're back to movies that won't make us depressed with September 28th's Impulse. It has Agnes of God here, along with Otter, and one day her mother calls her and just starts swearing at her, and then shoots herself. They go to her hometown because of it, and we find out that she didn't die, and is in the hospital. We see an odd set of tracks through a field, and she returns to her old house. Her brother is Chet, so she's stewed, but it seems that before this happened, there was an earthquake that surprised the town. But then, they notice that people are acting strange and aggressive, and there's an incident at the bank that calls the attention of Lieutenant Chapman. This guy tries to cut in and gets really angry when Jennifer turns him down, but after this block of films, I'm confused. Doesn't that make him the hero of the film? After they encounter more angry people, they go to see the doctor, but they're lucky that he's not in a cocoon, but he's clearly affected as well, as he kills Jen's mom. Everything escalates, and soon the sheriff is shooting kids for vandalism, but after a while, it seems like even Stewart is falling victim to it. But then, when they all figure out the cause of it, will they be able to stop it? Especially when Peter Jason is involved. So, this little thriller is coming at you from Graham Baker, and we encountered him a while back on the 81 project with The Final Conflict. Later in the 80s, we'll see him on the Sci-Fi project with Alienation. Originally, Louis Teague was slated to direct, but he instead opted to go do Cat's Eye, so Baker stopped in to finish the job. It had a decent-sized budget of $10 million, and that might sound pretty standard, but it's interesting to me that this movie was only $1 million less than Splash. It wasn't nearly as big of a hit, though, and only scrounged up less than $3 million at the box office, marking it as a dud. And I'm gonna give it a 2.5. I like the idea, and it's doing some cool stuff with the atmosphere, but the characters are all super flat, and the pacing is way too slow. The SFCS is just a 1.5 since it vanished quickly and no one talked about it at all, but it did have a number of names involved, so it got some recognition. Should you watch it? I'd say no, but you might have a different impulse. This next one actually got a full release late in '85, but it did have a premiere at a Chicago Film Festival in October of '84, and it's City Limits. It takes place 15 years from now, and when movies say that, I think they're intending that it's like always 15 years from whenever you're watching, but I usually relate it to its release, so I suppose it's meant to be 1999. Cougar is here, and he returns home to his adoptive father, Mufasa. He tells us that some sort of plague killed off most of the adults in the world, and he survived and raised Lee, but recently had to let him roam free to find adventure. He wears this skull helmet and intends to find and join the Clippers, a motorcycle gang. He goes to LA to find them, but immediately runs afoul of factory workers and a rival gang. He does finally meet the Clippers though, and one of their members is Charlie, and another is Cruiser, but they don't let him in their little club. He does meet up with Yogi though, and she's Rae-Dawn Chong, and you may say to yourself, weird, she doesn't look anything like her father, Tommy Chong. Well, look up her mother Maxine Sneed and realize that her genetics were freaking strong, because they might as well be clones. But then, when it turns out that one of their rivals died in trying to get him, they want blood, and the Clippers agree to allow a trial by combat. But the head of the DAs is working with the boss of that factory, so when the fight is about to go down, Gracie Law shows up as a representative of the company, and Lee manages to win the battle, becoming an official member. But when Bolo, the factory leader, is trying to force both gangs to work for him and kills Whitey, Wickens goes out to get in touch with them and fight back. This one was directed by Aaron Lipstadt, and is only his second feature. Previously, he had made the super low budget Android that was covered back in '82, and right after this, he'd go full force into directing TV shows, including Miami Vice, The Equalizer, and Quantum Leap. The success of Android got him some leeway to access around $2.5 million to get this one made, and he reused a number of the actors from that one. Although I mentioned that this was first screened at a film festival, that version of the film isn't available to view. After that screening, they went back and did a number of reshoots and added a completely new music score, although there doesn't seem to be any information about what those reshoots entailed. It did get a theatrical release, but there doesn't seem to be any numbers involved to know how well it did, but it then went on to the home market. Like some others here, it also got some attention by getting riffed on by Joel and the Bots, but for the most part has been forgotten. And it's okay, it's a 2.5. The story's fine, but nothing we haven't seen before, and for a post-apocalyptic future, it sure seems like everything is just a warehouse. The SFCS is just a 1.5 since it didn't make any sort of mark on the genre at all, but I'll give it a minor boost for having a good amount of known actors involved. Should you watch it? It's somewhat skippable, like there's far better dystopian future movies out there, some of them right on this block.
You got ideas, Lee?
Yeah, I got lots of ideas, Mick.
Alright, let's end this next block in a big way. Big in terms of size of the main character. And this next one has an unknown date, but it did release at some point in '84, and it's Gojira Fantasia, otherwise known as Godzilla Fantasia. I probably won't talk too much about this one because of its nature, but right away here, you can kind of get the idea of what this is, and the word Fantasia being in the title tips it off. It's a clip show movie, just giving you snippets of the entire Goji saga up until this point. Like you see, the last movie with the big G was back in 1975 with Terror of Mechagodzilla, and the character's popularity and box office had waned. But the time was right for a resurgence, and we'll talk more about that a little later in '84. But the people were interested in the character again, and the hype for a new entry had begun. So there was a concert. It featured the music of Akira Ifukube, who had done a good deal of the scores for the various Godzilla films, including the very first one. So they organized a 3-act symphonic Fantasia concerto that featured music from the series and held it at the Tokyo Metropolitan Hibiya Public Hall in August of 1983. It was a big event and even had Akihiko Hirata, the actor who played Dr. Serizawa in Godzilla 54, come out and introduce the show in character. The first half of this special presentation is the contents of that performance, set to clips from the franchise. And that was it for the live performance and the symphony, but that's not where this film version ends, since it goes on for a whole second half. That portion uses selections from a musician named Makoto Inoue, and over the course of 1983 to '84, he released 3 different albums that were tributes to those classic Godzilla scores, done with a synthesizer. So, the second half of this film plays selections from that, mostly similar to those featured on the symphony, also set to clips from the old films. If you're looking for a story or something, you're not getting it here, since it's just a selection of stuff with the big man in it and his associates from a bunch of the old movies. But if you're a fan of seeing big lizard action, this is just that, set to a gorgeous soundtrack. And I don't know how to rate this, so I'll give it a 3. This isn't something that I would watch, but I love having it on in the background while I do other things. The music is astounding, and who doesn't just love seeing Godzilla crush cities? The SFCS is just a 1.5 though, since it's not like it's an actual Godzilla movie, and it's one that's not talked about much, but I'll give it a 0.5 because it's Godzilla. Should you watch it? If you're looking to watch a movie, then no. But if you're just in the mood to see kaiju calamity set to rad tunes, then give it a go. So there you have it, a little further into 84, and I have to say my favorite on this block, this is a tough one because the best movie on this block is Threads. It's the best made movie on here. But my favorite one is Brother from Another Planet. It's just easier to watch than Threads is. I love watching Threads, but it's really not fun at all. Brother from Another Planet is just a more enjoyable watch. Let me know which is your favorite down below in the comments. I want to hear that. Which of these do you love? Which of these have you seen? Which of these would you now like to see? Put all that down below in the comments. If you like the video, click the thumbs up to give it a like. If you like the channel, subscribe to it and check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines where you can help support the channel like these amazing people right here do. And, you know, there's not much left to go in 1984 in terms of genre stuff here. We don't have a whole lot to go. I think there's only one more episode left to go, maybe two. We'll see what's left right here on the 80s Project Sci-Fi Edition.